The Audemars 15400, is it the best watch that's ever been designed? Let's take a look. Now before we take a closer look at the details on this watch, it's important we know a little bit about the history. In 1972, the Swiss watch industry was far different from what it is now. They were struggling to sell and the quartz crisis was taking over. But Audemars went against everyone else, and instead of releasing quartz models or cheapening the brand, they decided to release the most expensive steel sports watch ever. In 1972, when the Royal Oak was launched, it was the most expensive luxury sports watch on the market by a mile. It was launched with a price of 3,300 Swiss francs. Now, just for a bit of perspective, a Rolex Submariner that we all know was 10 times less. That's correct. The Royal Oak was 10 times the price of a Rolex Submariner, because back then the Rolex Sub was an affordable tool watch. It was still expensive, but nowhere compared where it is today. Now, to do this, they employed a designer called Gerald Genta, the most famous watch designer that's ever lived. And rumour has it that the boss at Audemars at the time gave him the brief at 4 PM in the afternoon, and by the next morning he had come up with the design for this watch. Now, it's said that Genta got his inspiration for the bezel off of a vintage dive helmet, and that's what the bolts represent. Now, you may think you see the Royal Oak everywhere. I always hear it. You see it everywhere. Everyone's got one. Well, that really isn't the case. Audemars today make 40,000 watches a year. 5,000 go to America, 4,000 go to China, and the rest is split between the whole of the world. And that's across all ranges. That's men's, women's, their dress watches, and the Royal Oak, perpetuals. So there's not many when you divide it up. Not many at all, especially when you think Rolex make 800,000 watches a year, which is a lot more. You're going to see a lot more Rolexes than you are this, but you're going to see a lot less of these than you will the Vacheron overseas, because Vacheron only make 25,000 watches a year. So if you want an exclusive watch, grab that one. But this is still quite rare. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a cheap watch, and by cheap I mean it's £17,000 new, but you can't get them new, so you're gonna have to pay around £19,000 or £20,000 for this watch. I mean, the 15400, which is my personal favourite, and we'll go into why it's my favourite compared to other Royal Oaks in a bit, but this was discontinued and prices are now around the 19 to 20,000, which I still think it's very reasonable for this watch. This is one special watch compared to when you think you're paying 8+ for a Submariner now. Daytona ceramics are going for 20. This is 20 times the watch of a Rolex Daytona, and I own one, so I know what I'm talking about. This is special on every level. If I had the money, would be happy to pay £30,000 for this watch. I think it's worth it, personally. That's compared to what else is on the market, obviously. I'd prefer to pay nothing for it, or £100, but that's never going to happen, and we're going to look into why it costs so much in a bit, and why I think it's actually quite good value. Now, when I say it's quite good value, I mean it's quite good value for the level of finishing compared to its competitors, which it hasn't got many, to be honest. There's been a lot of people trying, or a lot of companies trying, but they haven't quite got there. Obviously the leader of the pack is the Patek Nautilus, and that the 5711, which is the equivalent of this, and that is going for £50,000 plus. So this is less than half the price. The Nautilus hasn't got hacking seconds. I mean, I don't think that's acceptable for a watch that's going for £45,000-50,000, and it uses pins and sleeves in the bracelet instead of screws now. This has screws. I mean, that has screws in every link, as you saw the previous video. Very well made, and an everyday watch. This is not an everyday watch, and we're going to take a closer look at that now. Now, time for a closer look at the 15400. Now, like I said earlier, the watch was inspired by a vintage dive helmet, hence the screws, and it's named the Royal Oak after a British fleet of 8 vessels that were also called the Royal Oak. Now, this is completely hand finished. Every edge, the movement, the dial, and this is why I say it's hard to fake these watches. Quite easy to fake Breitlings, Rolexes, but very hard to fake these convincingly, and I'll show you why. If we just look at this dial, you can see those little dots in between the squares going round in a circular fashion. Now, that is because this is a tapisserie dial made on a special machine by hand. That's not easy to fake. You can fake the look of the watch and fake the look of the dial, but not that. And everything about it, the edges, every angle on this has been hand finished. And again, when I talk about value for money, this has been hand finished. Rolex and Breitling are basically machine made. I mean, look at this bracelet here. The edges on it, the finishing, the brushed and polished edges, seamless from the case down. Now, Breitling make a great bracelet, especially for the price point, but as you can see, they're good, but they're just polished links. This is a whole nother level, and this is what I talk about. Although this watch is probably 8 times the price of that watch, I believe it's worth it because of the extra level that's gone through here. It's got a screw down crown, good for 50 metres swimming. I would never take a watch with 50 metres swimming, but it's good to go. And why I prefer this 15400 over the 15500 is on the 15500 the date has been moved to the outside and the automatic is missing. This is quite a big watch, so with those missing I think the dial's too plain. I like this, and this also has the 3120 caliper in, which we'll look at in a bit. But as you can see, all the brush finishing. Now, these are white gold. They're bolts, not screws. Although they look like screws, they're actually bolts. The screws are on the underside, and that clamps the case down. Again, you can just see all the polished edges, the slight rubber poking out. The bracelet is beautiful. The clasp, amazingly made. Very secure. And the movement, again, we talk about fakes. This movement, see the balance in there? It's quite a simple balance. I mean, these are hard to fake, these movements. To be fair, they're pretty good. But if we have a look at this balance, now this is known as a gyromax balance, and you can see it's regulated by little screws on the outside, and every edge of that movement has been hand finished, hand beveled. By beveling I mean these separate bridges have had these lines, see they shine different angles, been polished by hand. Now this movement has a 22 karat gold rotor, and Audemars designed it in such a way that it's smaller so you can see more of the movement. We look at the Breitling again for comparison. See how big the rotor is on this? It's basically 50%, whereas the rotor on this has been specially engineered, and this has got 55 to 60 hour power reserve. And also, what a lot of luxury watchmakers don't get credit for is they actually slow down the beat rate. It's harder to regulate a watch with a slower beat rate. This runs at 21,000 vibrations per hour. This runs at 28,000 vibrations per hour, so more wear on the parts than this. The clever thing about this movement as well, although it's harder to regulate because it runs slower, the movement should last longer, and this has got a massive power reserve. Now normally a long power reserve means 2 mainsprings. This has only got 1, and it's been specially developed that it gives an equal amount of force over the 60 hours, not all at the beginning, none at the end. So very accurate movement, very well engineered, and there's a few other little clever bits in there. So absolutely amazing watch. As you can see, it's got a dent from a Panerai buckle up there. Doesn't really bother me. Before I forget, Audemars used to always use JLC movements, and that was because Audemars used to own 40% of JLC. Now this watch is only just under 10mm thick, so it's remarkably thin. Not really a fair comparison this time because this is massive. This is 15mm, it's got a chronograph as well, long power reserve. But under 10mm is a lovely size, but it wears big. Look at that. It wears like a 43. I'll put it on my wrist. Now I have 7.5 inch wrist, and it's big. In length, I think it's about 54mm from where it comes down at the side. So 54mm overall, compared to this dresses straight down. So this is a 41mm, the same size as that Audemars Royal Oak, but this wears a lot smaller. You can wear it on a smaller wrist, whereas this will not wear on a smaller wrist. You need quite a big wrist to pull that off. Again, the crown, screw down, beautiful. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed getting a closer view at my 15400. Now, I don't like talking about watches as investments because I mainly think they're a good store of money rather than investments. But this watch definitely has all it takes to be an investment. Although there's more expensive and more complicated watches out there, I believe the finishing and the simplicity of this watch is what makes it so special. And again, if Patek can hit 45,000 to £50,000 for the Nautilus 5711, I don't see any reason why this couldn't. Now to me it doesn't matter if it does, because I am not selling this watch because I believe it's unreplaceable. If I sold this I'd have to buy another one, because there's not another watch out there that I believe is as good as this. If you feel there is, please leave it down in the comments, because I'm yet to find it. Maybe the Royal Oak Perpetual, but I like the simple dial. It's a sports watch, the most expensive luxury sports watch in 1972, and I think it still stays true to that. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and until next time.